Okay, so I wanted to do this quick live stream so that I could talk about the grading for flawless ear training. There is some confusion about it, but very simply, and then I'll explain why this is the way it is. You don't need to spend more than 3 days on any single lesson. And even 3 days is being a little bit conservative. The course was really designed initially so that you could take one lesson per day. That's why if you take the entire course, there's about 250 lessons. So if you were to take a week or 2 weeks and strive for perfection on each lesson, you'd never finish a course. You would burn out or you'd quit before you finished it. And that's not the intention. The intention of this course was so that you could go in and get something novel and new each day, and it would slightly change. I mean, if I give you kind of the trajectory here, unit one, two, and three, that's about 60 lessons. And for 60 lessons, 60 days, if you came in every single day, you would be focusing only on the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth, and then foundational exercises that help kind of retrain your brain and help you understand ear training from kind of a new lens. So you don't need to be spending a ton of time on each lesson or striving for perfection. I say that in the course because initially, when I released this course, it was for my university students, and it was to allow them to get some supplementary training in addition to what we were doing in class. And for people on YouTube, since I was only releasing these as I could, maybe once every week, once every 2 weeks, you get a new lesson. I threw in information about how you should try and get a perfect score. At first, I thought that was going to be necessary because I was going to go very incremental. But as the course developed, some lessons presented additional challenges that later lessons won't. So it's this kind of back and forth between this is easy, it gets hard, and then it gets easy again. It's this philosophy I have where you take one step forward, two steps back, and you actually make progress, right? Because once you learn something, then you have to kind of go back and sweep it back up so that you can readdress what you just learned and make sure that you didn't miss sort of any, gaps in your training. So, bottom line, if you're confused at all, this is what I suggest you do. You take one lesson per day, finish the unit. When you get to the final exam, if you can't pass the final exam with only a few mistakes, and I'm talking like 3 or 4 mistakes, then you can go back and do the entire unit again, one lesson per day. And then you take the final exam a second time. Now, this will give you a little bit of an assessment too, because you've taken the final exam once and only once, and then you went through all the lessons again, and now hopefully you score better on the final exam the second time. If you're still not quite where you need to be, then you can do the third day. You go through the unit one more time, final exam. And no matter where you're at that point, go on to the next unit. Go on to unit two if you're on unit one. And the reason for this is because, for example, 60 days for unit one, two, and three, right? We're basically focusing on the same concepts in different ways. We need novel stimuli every single day. That's the idea. But then when you go on to, let's say, unit four, where the perfect fourth and fifth are not being emphasized, they're still being trained. We don't let go of what we learned. This is a very common pedagogical thing in music where we constantly add to what we've learned. Okay. So when you get to unit four, you just keep going because you're still working on the fourth and fifth. And you do the same thing in unit four. You go through the entire course, you take the final. If you don't pass the final, go through unit four again, take the final, maximum of 3 times, then go on to unit five. Why? Because unit five reinforces and adds to unit four. So sometimes what happens, and this is a problem with a lot of ear training courses, is they'll keep giving you the same drills, the same exercises over and over and over again. And I mean, I think I'm not going to mention any names, but some really popular programs will do this where you have to get so many correct and then you can move on to the next exercise. And the next exercise will either be identify more of the same or they may add a new interval or something like that, and they'll try and do it slowly. The problem with this is that you're constantly focusing on the same material. You're not given a chance to really push yourself to kind of the edge of your comfort zone. So what this course does, the flawless ear training course, is it allows you to constantly train the ear in different ways. And if you do this consecutively, I mean, if I got an email this morning, that's kind of what prompted this. The student said they've been going through the flawless course for about 2 years. That's way too long, and it was necessary because this is one of the original students, and I was taking some time to get these lessons out because I was teaching in the university, but now I'm releasing them much more quickly. So now you can follow this new procedure. But the problem with that approach is that when you go for perfection, that's not how real music is. When you're learning a piece, you'll learn it to a certain level and then you'll perform it. And then the second performance gets better. The third performance gets better. I recently helped one of my composition students release their first CD, and he had really amazing instrumentalists perform his music and record it. And even this instrumentalist pointed this out, which is that, usually before a recording's done, these pieces are performed in many different concerts. So each time there's a concert, you learn something new about the piece and you keep getting better. Well, that's kind of how the flawless course is designed. You learn a fundamental skill, and then as you keep going forward, you still build on those skills, but you keep learning new things, you keep learning new dimensions. So the bottom line here is that you don't need to spend a ton of time on each lesson. You don't need to get perfection. I'm going to say, and mostly in the video course, by the time I started doing the audio course, I stripped most of these instructions. And when you get to unit 6, you'll definitely see that I am officially, this is the rule, one lesson per day, no more than 3 days. But you don't need to be spending a ton of time getting perfection. What you need, and this is what I want to emphasize, novel stimuli. You need something new each day, slightly new. Even if it's as simple as I play the perfect fourth and fifth with a different rhythm. That's what apps don't do. Apps are not designed that way. They have to be somewhat efficient. When we create these audio or video courses, I can just sit here at the piano and I can play it with a different articulation each time. This is what will eventually build that ability to really hear what we're practicing. And that's the other thing I want to talk about a little bit. I'm just going to say this. Most people that start this course will never finish it. I know that. And I had a choice to make about a year ago when I really started taking this seriously. I could either make a course where you could go through everything I'm going to teach from units 1 to 16. I could do that in 3 months. And you'd get in, you'd make some progress, you'd go through all the concepts. We would take an approach where you get 100% on each lesson. And that's kind of where the shift changed after unit 1. I realized, no, it's better to keep going incrementally, step by step. Just give them a new lesson each day so you don't have to keep repeating the same lesson. So you can take that approach where you create a 3-month course and you say get 90% and move on. But what you end up doing is you just end up practicing that lesson. You end up getting really good at just doing that lesson. You're not getting constant stimulus. You're not getting new and novel activities. And so I had to make this decision. Well, I know more people will complete it if I say it's a 3-month course, but it's a disservice because if I make it a 3-month course, it's not going to be the ear training course that I know will actually help those who are committed to finishing it. And this is one of those things where it doesn't really come together till the end. This was always how it worked in my college courses too. I tell students, study, keep up. It's going to start to make sense the last 2 or 3 weeks. And in my evaluations, I constantly got reviews that would say, yeah, it actually was really hard. The course was really difficult, but then actually it did come together at the end, like the professor said it would. It's just how it works. It's how my teaching works. I build such a massive foundation that by the end, when we finally put those final pieces into the puzzle, things start to click. But you have to put in so much effort. And that's why people aren't going to finish this course. And I know that, but I'm not out here to just make a bunch of money off a course. If I was doing that, I would not be doing 250 lessons. I would market it real precise. I would say, develop this and this skill within 3 months and you'd be done. And I would just sell that one course and promote it and focus on that. But I'm interested very much in something else. I'm interested in trying to actually create a course that takes you as far as I can take you. And in order to do that, it's going to be about 250 lessons. And if you think about that, if you go one lesson a day, that's, about 3/4 of a year. And people are going to quit because it's going to get hard. They're not going to see the results they immediately want. They're going to put in a certain amount of effort and think, well, by now, I can hear fourths and fifths. I couldn't hear that before. They'll start to notice differences, but be like, I should be better. I should be able to transcribe music I hear. And I have to tell you, it took me 20 years. Okay. But see, I walked and I had a lot of things happen in between. And I was constantly searching and trying out different things and working with my students and helping, over 1,000 students that I actually worked with one-on-one, definitely over 1,400. And it took me a long time to figure out how to do this effectively. And when I really got good at it was when I was teaching the university. When I started teaching the university, that's when I had all these students of differing levels coming in each day, and I could try different things. And I would take notes. I would remember the things would work and the things that wouldn't work. And each year, my students got better at ear training. So you're not going to take 20 years, but it could take you 3 years to get through this course. And if you're simply taking an ear training course, that's baseline. That is the basic activity that musicians should do every day to improve. You don't have to do ear training your whole life, but you do have to reach a point where you can hear a fifth, a fourth, an inverted chord, a seventh chord. You can do basic dictations. You can do this in kind of a controlled environment. And then you take it into your musical world. But you need that foundation. Otherwise, it's kind of like this is a student gave me this idea, and I thought it was a really great analogy. It's like painting, right? If you go out and you want to paint a tree, well, you know that you want to replicate this color, but you don't actually, it's kind of hard to understand, but let's say you don't actually know what green looks like, okay? How would you be able to imagine green in your mind if you didn't know what green looked like? So you see the color of the tree, it has a basic form, and you are mixing your paints and you're trying to figure out how to get green, but you don't know how to. Now, if you had been trained how to mix paints properly and you knew that yellow and blue makes green, then you could mix those two colors together and get green. But without that, you're mixing red, you're mixing brown, you're mixing blue with other colors. You're trying to get to that green, and it's a trial and error thing. So with the basic fundamentals that we learn from ear training, you bypass that. You learn it much more quickly. You learn the different color combinations that make other colors, and you become much more efficient. But there's a breakthrough period where most people stop. And I'm old enough now to know that most things in my life, when I've had a breakthrough, they've occurred after a long period of work, right? So I'm working, I'm working, I'm working, and then all of a sudden I reach a point where I don't think that what I'm working on can succeed. I think it's going to fail. And so what happens is one of two things. You either quit and you say, this is a waste of time, or you keep going and you push through and you have a breakthrough. And then all of a sudden, that thing you were trying to achieve becomes possible. Most people quit when they hit that wall. Most people quit when it gets really difficult. So I'm just encouraging you not to quit, but I know that my course is not for everybody because I know that a lot of people won't want to put in that kind of commitment. they don't have the time, or they don't want to make the time, or they want results faster. And it's my belief that this program works. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep spending time on it. And so you kind of have to trust me a little bit, and you'll have to go through and you will see results, but they won't be massive. They won't be like 1 week all of a sudden you're hearing a symphony. It's going to be more like you hear a drone in your mind. We're talking about audiation now. And then maybe you hear a second note on top of it. And then you make it more clear. You hear it as a piano, a violin, you hear it as different instruments. And then all of a sudden, you've been doing these exercises and you realize, hey, I can remember 5 notes in a melody when before I could only remember 4. Okay, that's progress. Or now I can remember an 8 note melody that's very angular and not very melodic at all. I can remember 8 separate pieces of information in my mind. And before you couldn't do that. So these are incremental things that take you where you are and make you better. And so if you're looking for a program that takes you where you are and makes you better, then my programs are right for you. If you're looking for something that's a little more packaged, that you can clearly see results within that particular application, you'll see results within the application because you're training the same thing over and over again. You're just getting really good at answering the same question. It's like if I ask you the same question every day, what's your favorite color? Well, maybe the first time you think about it, but after a while, you're just like blue, 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 whatever your favorite color is. And then that's kind of the end of it. I mean, it doesn't really translate to you being able to identify any other colors, right? So I did this. I went a little longer than I wanted to, but I did this so that I could tell you one a day. Consistency is more important than perfection. Coming in each day, get to the final. If you can't pass the final, take the unit again. Try that 3 times. Then, wherever you're at, move on to the next one. So, why am I doing it this way? Why don't you just take one lesson 3 days in a row? It has to do with stimulus, right? So, if you take the same lesson 3 days in a row, you're getting better at doing that lesson. Your progress won't be as fast. I promise you, your progress won't be as fast. In the absence of all the other lessons I created, that was necessary at one point. Ignore the instructions on grading. Do not follow the instructions on grading. This is the instructions. One lesson a day, get to the final. Can you pass the final with 4 or 5 mistakes? No. Okay. Do the unit again. That's your second run through. Keep track of how you do on the final. Did you do better? Did you even get one more correct? Great. Still not ready to move on? One more pass through, then get to the final. And whether you pass it or not, move on to the next unit because you've done the prep work. You've had the stimulus, you've had the exposure. You're done. You can move on. So that's kind of my advice to you. My hopefully it's motivating. Like I'm not trying to say that you're not committed enough or anything like that, but I am saying that this is a long course, and I know that it's going to be difficult for a lot of people to just push through. And I could have designed the course differently, but this is the most honest way I felt I could do it. So let me know if you have any questions. If you're struggling, I mean, send me an email and I will get back to you or post a comment here on YouTube and just keep going. Okay, keep training your ear. It's a daily thing. It's just something you do. It's just like you practice your scales every day. Do you stop practicing your scales? No, you get better, you get faster, you practice them in different ways. If you're a brass player like I am, you practice with different articulations, you know. You practice trying to do it all in one breath. You practice taking a breath after each note to get good at really taking those quick breaths. You practice the scale in multiple different ways. You never stop. When you're a professional performer, you still practice your technique. And the ear is the brain, and the brain is what makes music. And so it's not your fingers. I mean, that's a part of it, but all that's coming from the brain. If you can't visualize something, if you can't hear something, you can still be an amazing musician, but you're missing an aspect of your training that only takes about 30 minutes a day. And don't worry about it. There's no reason to get frustrated. I hear frustration a lot, and I anticipated there'd be frustration because I have so much experience teaching this. Frustration's normal. But when you get past that frustration, you just say, whatever, I don't need to be frustrated. I'm just going to go in, I'm going to do these exercises, and and then I'm going to go about my day and not worry about that ear training session. I'll come back again tomorrow, do it again. And you do this as much as you can. I almost recommend a day off a week. I think that's nice. It lets the brain just kind of recover. You'll see progress, you know? But if you're expecting something, this is very Buddhist, right? But if you are expecting a result or desire a result at a certain point in time, the result will never be exactly what you want it to be at the time you want it to be. You know, you'll eventually get there, but it might take you on a windy path. You might want to be able to transcribe melodies, but you notice that actually, first, all I'm doing is I'm hearing perfect fifths in certain contexts. But that's not helping me transcribe melodies, but that's what the brain needs to work on right then. And then it adds other things, like you start to hear fourths and thirds, and you start to hear harmonies, and you start to hear inversions, and you start to hear the intervals that make up chords. You go beyond just hearing major and minor chords, and you hear a major third and a minor third, you know? So you can start to separate things. And then the more you practice it, the quicker you get at it. So you can't predict your progression, but if you follow the steps in the flawless course, you just go one lesson a day, you will eventually start to see how this all comes together. And again, it's all the way towards the end. I know it's not unit 16. I think it might be 14 or 15. I've got it all mapped out. But when I finally introduce the major and minor seconds, that's actually when things start coming together. Now, I have mentioned once before that a lot of people kind of quit about Unit 6 because they feel like they have the skills they need. What I mean by that is they're starting to be able to hear major, minor, augmented, and diminished chords. And they're starting to be able to hear the perfect fifth, fourth, major third, minor third, triads, and inversions. And they think, hey, that's actually a lot. That's all I need. But I encourage you not to stop there. By saying a lot of people quit there, I'm just telling you that's where I see a lot of people. They'll either email me and say, I've enjoyed the course, I've been making progress, but I feel like after unit 5 or 6, and I just got an email today like that, I won't need to continue. I'm like, that's fine, but I feel like if you quit at that point, that's the point where things really start to get real. I mean, because after that, we go into the major and minor 6 and all these other exercises and chord progressions that deal with that. And once you get through those units, you really start to get a good sense for hearing chord progressions as well. But it's not till the end. It's not until we polish everything and bring it together with practical application. We're not doing practical application. We're training skills right now. We're training components. It's like you have a puzzle, okay? Like different colored blocks, okay? And each component is a different colored block. Well, if you stop at the perfect fifth, you only have blue blocks, and you can build something really nice with blue blocks. There's actually a piece that I wrote that I'm going to put out here soon. It's called Spectrum. It's based entirely on the perfect fifth. And I just wanted to do that to see if I could. It's also, I'm kind of giving you a preview now. It's something that I'm going to give to people that they can listen to. So it's music that allows you to kind of start to hear perfect fifths in context. But back to my analogy, if you build only blue blocks, you can build some pretty cool structures, but it's just blue. Okay, so now you add the fourth, maybe a red block, you know? So now you've got more variety. When you finally get all the colors together, you can really build a very dynamic scene. You can have green trees and blue lakes and dirt that's brown, you know? So if you get to unit 6 and quit, which is the point where I think a lot of people say, I've invested enough time, I'm going to do something else now, then you'll have the basic collection. You'll have the triads, inversions, and basic intervals. It build up these chords. But if you go beyond that, it goes so much deeper.